Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for designing and executing an effective mentor screening protocol. We know that there are more people who are trying to log on right now. We're just going to be patient and we appreciate your patience. Give them another, let's say, minute and a half, 2 minutes to make sure that everybody who wants to be on, because we know there are a number of other people who are also registered, that everybody is logged on, and then we're going to get started. So thanks very much. We'll get going like in a minute and a half. Okay, Jack, I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, good afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here this afternoon with us. This is a webinar in designing and executing an effective mentor screening protocol. Um, uh, I'm Bruce Beckwith. I'm Director of Program Development for Mentor New York in the New York or downstate office. I'm joined today by my colleague in Western New York, Jack Kavanaugh. Jack, say hello.
Hey, everyone. Glad you're able to join us today.
Great. So today's webinar is about effective screening techniques, about setting up a protocol and the techniques for and the tools that you need to determine or discern who's going to be an appropriate volunteer for your mentoring program, no matter what model of mentoring you're going to be using. What I want to add as a caveat from the start is that given our current circumstances and the health crisis that is happening, and the fact that any kind of face-to-face contact with mentees is most likely, we are assuming for most programs in New York State at least, are prohibitive right now. Virtual mentoring is really the only choice to stay in contact with your mentor, whether you're emailing, texting, or in a lot of cases, people are starting to video chat. We're going to cover that. As we go through, we are going to talk about what kind of enhancements or what kind of thought you need to give when it comes to virtual mentoring The screening process is really not much different, but there are some considerations that we're going to throw in. So we will be talking about that. In the meantime, you are all muted right now. That is so that we can keep the sound quality balanced. At a certain point, we're going to unmute you so we get questions and we can have some discussion. In the meantime, if you do have questions that are pertinent to specific slides or anything that I'm talking about, please use the chat box, and we'll check the chat box regularly, and we'll try to address some of those questions as we go along. Uh, so, um, uh, the other thing I want to mention before I want to talk about some of the other webinars that are coming up. This Friday, you may have gotten a notice about our Friday morning coffee hour. This Friday, you'll be having coffee with Jack, and next Friday, you'll be having coffee with me. So if you want to join, you can just register at our website, mentornewyork.org. You'll see on the homepage links to webinars and trainings, and you can go right in. It's going to be like a town hall. It's just going to be an open forum. It's an hour from 9 to 10 on Friday morning. We just want to hear what's going on with people, give people an opportunity to share their thoughts and listen to what other programs are doing. So we hope that you can join us. If you can't get on to this Fridays, we will be doing it every Friday. So please join us for that. And we have a few more webinars coming up in the next month. Jack, can you talk about some of those webinars that are coming up?
Yeah, sure. So we're rolling out the full schedule. So we won't know. I don't know exactly which ones are going to be when yet, but we'll have at least one per week, if not two, including continuing this series of doing brief 1-hour webinars on all of the elements of effective practice. So screening. Next week will be matching and supervising matches after that and things like that. We're also going to be featuring a few webinars on some more specific topics like trauma-informed care, growth mindset, different things like that. We did have last week one on mentoring young people impacted by opioids, and all those are recorded on their website, and you'll get all that information in a follow-up email after this, so you'll be able to access the recorded ones as well.
Okay, great. So let's get started. Let's go to the first slide, which is actually a poll. We want to get an idea of actually who's online with us today and what where you're at. So, I apologize. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so click which one actually relates to you. Are you currently managing a youth-based mentoring program, or you have no experience running a youth mentoring program, or you're in the process of developing a youth-based mentoring program? Click whichever one best applies to you, and then we'll get an idea of where people are at. Give you like 30 seconds. Okay, terrific. Wow. So most of you currently manage a program. 17% of you have no experience running youth-based, and a few of you are just in the beginning stages of developing a program. All right, the information today I think is going to be apropos to everybody. Let's move forward. The agenda. I think that's slide 4. Great. Okay, so today's webinar, we are going to look at why screening volunteer mentors is so important. We're also going to look at the tools necessary to determine a mentor candidate's fitness for being a mentor. We're going to discuss the significance of a candidate's childhood experience on their interactions with young people. We'll also look at how to explore a volunteer's perceived ideas about mentoring. Why do we use references and what do we want to learn from them? The importance of background checks and some additional tools that can be very useful. So let's take the next poll. Let's get an idea of where your experience with screening is at. I have no experience screening mentors. I have some understanding of screening procedures. I have experience screening mentors, but I can improve. Whichever one best applies to you, just click on it and let's see where people's level of experience is at. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. There we go. Okay, so we've got a lot of experienced people on the line. Okay, so I will try to keep this as high level as I possibly can. Um, we have about 18% who don't have any experience. That correlates to the 17% that are just thinking about starting a program. Some understanding of what the procedures are, but more than half of you actually have experience screening mentors. Okay, so some of this may be familiar to you, but we're going to run through all of it because I'm a believer in giving people all the information. If at any point it sounds like I am reading from a script, I just want to tell people that I am reading from a script, but that script is made up of my own words that I wrote myself. And the only reason why sometimes it sounds that way is because when I ad lib, as we say, I have a tendency to stammer, which you've probably already noticed. And I want to make sure, absolutely make sure, that I give you all the information that we think you should have. I always believe more information is better than less. So that's the reason why. Jack, let's go to this slide number 6. Jack, slide 6. Great. So what is the value of screening mentors? Why is it important to screen volunteers before we actually consider them for mentoring? One reason to screen potential mentors is to examine their personality and characteristics and see if they're in sync with being a good role model for youth. As managers of youth development programs, we have a responsibility and liability to make certain that young people in our care will be safe. The only way we can honestly vouch for any individual's intentions is through thoughtful scrutiny. Parents and guardians depend on us to know as much as possible about the volunteers we assign to their children, and they are right. So I'm going to ask all of you, take a moment. I want you to imagine something. I want all of you listening to imagine that you are the parent of an 11-year-old boy, an 11-year-old boy that you have enrolled in a mentoring program, a community-based mentoring program. After about 3 months on a wait list, you get a phone call from me, the program coordinator. And I say, hey, it's Bruce. And I've got great news. We've found somebody we think would be a terrific mentor for your child. They are geographically, they're well located, so it'll be easy for them to travel back and forth for outings. We think that their personalities are going to be good. I think it's going to be a good match. And after about a little brief discussion about the mentor, I tell you, so what I think is that we're gonna have the mentor come up on Saturday if you're gonna be home around 11 o'clock in the morning, and just take your son out for an hour or so, so that they can get to know each other. How would that be for you? How would you feel? How would that make you feel? If you are like most of us, your first question is, wait a minute, hold on. Who is this person? How much do you know about them? They can't just come here and take my child. I have to meet them. Um, I want to know more about them, etc. And they're right. They're absolutely right. So we have to be able to speak honestly about the volunteers. When we say we know this person, we have screened this person, uh, and we believe that they are going to be a responsible adult with your child. We have to be able to say that honestly, and the only way we can do that is actually by scrutinizing each individual who steps up to do the work. As program managers and supervisors, we need to not only know that potential mentors will be good with young people, but how cooperative candidates will be with the guidelines that we set out as programmers. And it's always helpful when we're ready to make matches that we feel we know something about a mentor's interests, talents, or special skills. They might be able to share those with their mentee. I'm sure most of you have on your applications something about if they speak another language. That's not an uncommon question that we would ask mentors. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, Jack. So mentoring comes with some very basic common tools that we use, okay? The process of determining a potential volunteer suitability for mentoring really requires the use of well-established screening tools. When used effectively, these tools can prove to be vital in your assessment. Excuse me. A thorough mentor screening should start with a candidate's contacting you about volunteering. Most program managers will pre-screen people prior to sharing the written application. This just ensures that everyone understands that what the screening process is, and they are volunteering for the right reason. We don't want to give out any application packet or refer them to an online application if their idea about what mentoring is not in sync with how our program is designed. It's also a really good idea to include a mentor job description along with details about the entire screening process with the application packet so the volunteers fully understand what it is that they're volunteering for and what's going to be expected of them. There really should never be any big surprises. So we don't want somebody saying like a month into the process, oh, I didn't know you were going to do a background check on me. I'm not comfortable with that. It should be right there from the very beginning in print where they can see it. Asking volunteers for written references that you can telephone after meeting the potential mentor is a standard practice. Also, a face-to-face interview is essential if we really want to get to know the potential mentor. Another standard practice for all programs working with minors is to conduct a criminal background check, as we mentioned a minute ago, for each individual. In addition to background checks, we always recommend that people use the sex offender registry that can provide information about anyone accused of a crime against a child. Keeping your eye on volunteers during the orientation or training will also offer you some insight into how they interact with other people. We'll talk later about how driving records can also be useful. So we start with a written application after the pre-screen. What's the best way to use a volunteer application? Let's go back to the overall purpose of screening potential mentors. What are we trying to learn about individuals, and how can the written application help us? Besides the basic data, such as name, address, contact information, the questions chosen to be on an application should help to inform the interviewer in the same way that a resume or a cover letter would work if you were looking for a job. We want to know about an applicant's previous experience with mentoring, tutoring, were they a camp counselor, or even if they just babysat when they were in high school. Simply asking candidates if they have the time to volunteer won't give a complete picture of their availability. Ask applicants to describe the week or even the typical day. You'll get a better idea if mentoring is something that they have the time for than simply by asking them if they have the time. I really believe that you should be the one to determine if this is something that can fit into their life, not the other way around. It's also a good idea to learn if applicants are affiliated with any other organizations or do any other type of volunteer work. Not simply from a scheduling point of view, but to double check to see if there's a possible conflict of interest with your mission. Asking some simple questions about a candidate's family and upbringing on the written application will help drive your more detailed conversation during the face-to-face interview. You want to ask questions on the application that will generate more questions in the interview. It's always a it's always good to know if a potential volunteer has any special interests or skills, as we mentioned before, or they speak another language, or they have an expertise in sports or art. Of course, it's important to know why someone wants to become a mentor. Adding a short essay question like this will help you understand an applicant's motivation as well as their expectations. Information like this will not only help you to screen more thoroughly and thoughtfully, but it can also guide you into future supervision conversations with the volunteer. Understanding what has inspired a mentor and their earliest life experiences will help you as a program manager later on when you are guiding them through some of the challenges that mentors often face. Okay, so we're going to do another poll. I want you to tell me about your families. Uh, were you the firstborn in your family? Are you a middle child? Are you the youngest member of your family, or are you an only child? Click which one applies to you or best applies to you. Okay, everybody click through. Wow, it's all over the place. Okay, we only have a few people. Only 9% of you are an only child. 23% are the youngest in their family. 36% are a middle child, and 32%. So it's sort of even there. I am the firstborn in my family. So next question. I have one more question for you. Next slide. If you could change the birth order, what would it be? Would you rather have been the oldest in your family? Would you rather have been the youngest in your family? Would you rather have had more siblings? Or do you wish you had been an only child? Which one best describes how you feel about growing up in the family you grew up? Okay. I would have rather had more siblings. Wow, 63%. We have 11% who are only children, and 11% of people wish they had been the oldest, and 16% said they would wish they would have rather have been the youngest. Okay. All of this for each of you as an individual, these answers are all very telling about how you feel about yourself, how you feel about family, how you feel about where a children is in the birth order and family. All of this is actually very important as we go into interview questions, as we conduct an interview with a mentor. So let's go on to the next slide and you'll see how this really plays out. Good mentors don't need to be child development experts. They just have to be someone who likes spending time with young people. All mentors learn as they go along, but being a good listener is a very important quality. Potential mentors should be natural at demonstrating good behavior. A good mentor finds it easy to act upbeat and be positive. When we're speaking with an applicant, we want to determine if this person is empathetic and able to show a positive regard for young people. What is their philosophy regarding discipline? Is this potential mentor someone who is willing to learn new skills? And can they take direction well from the program manager? It's very important that candidates for this kind of volunteer work are open-minded and culturally sensitive and do not judge others. Ask questions in the interview that will give you some insight into how they view current social issues. Are they especially sensitive issues related to the population that you serve? Good mentors are genuine in their being and honest in their behavior. Observing how they interact with you and their general demeanor is a valid determinant of how they will be with their mentee. We're looking for candidates who will be good thinking partners and show enthusiasm for the process of learning and growing. From your gut, trust the impression you have of the interviewee. In the end, when an interview is complete and the applicant has answered all your questions satisfactorily, but you may still have an uncomfortable feeling of something you can't quite put your finger on, listen to that instinct. When we're working with youth, it is always better to make a mistake on the side of caution rather than on the side of generosity. Remember, no one has a legal right to be a volunteer. If it doesn't feel right to you, you can get a second opinion from another colleague or simply pass on the candidate with no explanation. Most experienced volunteer interviewers agree it is best never to explain why you're passing on a person, and that's an important point. So the question always comes up, why do you need to know so much about my family? Why so many personal questions in an interview? Before I explain the answer to these questions, let's talk about risk management. For mentoring programs, screening volunteers is one of the most important pieces of risk management. As programs serving youth, we have a higher level of liability than other volunteer-based programs. Having a complete risk management plan is a critical part of running a mentoring program. Our board of directors expects that we will take every precaution where minors in our care are concerned. Most importantly, we are accountable to the parents and guardians of the mentees. We have to be able, as I said before, look them in the eye and tell them that they can trust the volunteer we have matched to their child. We can only do this with honesty and integrity when we have followed these universally accepted best practices in screening mentors, such as those established in the Elements of Effective Practice in Mentoring. That you can find more information about that if you want to look it up at our national website, which is at mentoring.org. Just look up resources and then look up EEP or Elements of Effective Practice will come up under that menu. So the answer to the question about why we explore a candidate's family and childhood is because the more we know about an individual's experience as a child, the closer we will be to understanding how they will relate to children themselves. Traditionally, we would start by asking an applicant to tell us about the family that they grew up in, playing off of the questions that you might have put on your application. Where are they in the birth order of their siblings? Like I asked you, what was it like being a middle child? Or what was it like being an older child? So just to expand on that a little bit, um, uh, I never expect that any two answers are going to be the same, but there are a lot of very common answers that people will give once you start doing this. Often, someone may say, "I loved being a middle child because basically my older brother and my younger sister always got more attention, and my parents sort of ignored me, and I got away with a little bit more." Other people will say, being in the middle, they did get ignored, and they hated that. And that gives you an opportunity to dive a little deeper into what did that feel like, what was that like, and what are your relationships with your siblings now. The answer to each of the questions that are asked should generate more questions. This is what I call like peeling an onion, layer by layer, until we find the feelings attached to the experience. Everyone's early life has good and bad feelings associated with it. What we should be looking for are powerful negative memories that might have been traumatic. How were those feelings dealt with then at the time when something may have happened? And how does that person deal with the memory now that they're an adult? For instance, an adult child of an alcoholic might tell you that they had counseling when they were in college and have attended Al-Anon meetings periodically. Or they might say, this is in the past, they try not to think about it. The second response should trouble you because it implies a lack of introspection and therefore the possibility of poor judgment should something with their mentee spark a flashback. Please don't confuse the process of assessment as judgment. Far from it. It is not the experience that we should care about, but rather how the potential mentor has processed the experience and how they manage the feelings associated with those memories. If an interviewee is thoughtful and introspective, they will be better able to keep their feelings separated from the experiences of their mentee, thereby avoiding over or underreacting in a given situation. Understanding how someone deals with stressful situations is also important. Mentoring can sometimes be stressful. It is a good practice to explore how potential mentors would handle some of that stress. So what I like to do is I like to provide opportunities in an interview where I give people case scenarios. I usually use real things that have happened in mentoring programs. I ran a program for 8 years, and I could write a very short book about a lot of really interesting things that happen between mentors and mentees. One of them being a mentee who had a temper tantrum in FAO Schwartz and kicked over an entire display. and how the mentor handled that and how the mentor themselves experienced that. Because how we deal with the mentors, how much we know about them and how we deal with the mentors when they call us with these challenges and these issues is a really important to the longevity of the match and how well they do moving forward. The interview is a good place to explore a candidate's ideas about mentoring, what they think this will be like. If you could pick the perfect mentee for you, who would that be and what would they look like? These questions can help you understand someone's preconceived ideas and correct any misconceptions about the role of a mentor. Make sure the potential mentor is not looking for a new best friend or thinks that they will become a savior to an underprivileged child. This thinking is not only incorrect, but left unchecked, it could lead to dangerous boundary crossing. An effective way to determine a volunteer's thought process is to, like I said before, pose scenarios to them based on real situations you may have experienced in your program. Think of one or two incidences involving mentors and mentees and ask the applicant how they might address these challenges. The object here is to screen out anyone who doesn't have an easy is not to screen out people who don't have an easy solution, but rather to get a feeling for someone's problem-solving skills and how well they will take supervision. For instance, when you tell them how the problem might best be dealt with, are they taking your experience and ideas in, or are they resistant to the input? Mentors are not only people who can do well with children, they need to be someone you can get along with and trust to follow guidelines as well as your advice. So I strongly recommend that when you're coming up with problem-solving scenarios in an interview moving forward, that you think of one of them uh, uh, as being a problem about confidentiality and or disclosure. Think about something that involves the privacy of the mentee or the privacy of the mentor, and about keeping a confidence or disclosing information. Um, uh, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. It is really not about our potential mentors knowing exactly how to handle a situation, but rather the feeling you get when you actually go into the conversation with them about ways that might be best way to handle it once they've responded to you. They may give you a terrific answer. You may have more things to add than that, or they may be confused. They might not give you a really appropriate answer, and you want to be able to respond by saying, that probably wouldn't work, but here's an idea that we've had when it comes up that has worked, and see how they respond to that. I think that's really more telling than anything else about how well a volunteer is going to do moving forward. So let's get to the references. Once you've met with a potential mentor, you might have some doubts or some unanswered questions still. I know it's happened to me a number of times. Speaking with one or two of the references provided by the volunteer is actually a good way to round out your opinion. A good way to get started is to verify some of the basic information provided in the written reference, such as how do you know the volunteer? What is the nature of your relationship? Once you've established trust, consider asking a question that provides you with a more accurate picture of the volunteer's personality or character. Stay away from questions that generate a simple yes or no answer. Instead, It's really good to think of a question or form a question that requires qualification and could provide the story of explanation, such as, tell me about one of the times when Michael lost his temper at work. Lastly, I've never known anyone to lie about something safety related regarding their own children. If you ask a reference point blank, would you leave your children or child in this volunteer's care for an afternoon away from your house? That's always very telling. And like I said, I don't think any of you would ever um, uh, take that question lightly at all. It's a very telling question that I often ask references. So background checks, which are let's talk about background checks because they're really important. Uh, uh, they are vital to the safety of our youth. They're also very important as far as the liability and for your insurance carriers. Jack, can we have slide 15? Super. Okay. That photograph makes it a little severe. I was just having a little fun, okay? So as you're well aware, one of the most critical pieces of mentor screening is the criminal background check. The value of a fingerprint background check is that no one has your fingerprints but you. Where it is possible for people to maintain multiple social security numbers, though it's not legal, people only have one set of fingerprints. Traditional inked print rolling is what most of us have been familiar with for years, but we are looking at a much more modern system available to us now in most areas. That's the live active fingerprint. There are several advantages of the live active print. Where inked prints were only good for your background check. If you wanted updated information about the volunteer, you would have to reprint them every couple of years. With a live active check, once the prints are entered into the system, if there's any change in the volunteer's criminal status, you will be notified immediately. Secondly, this process is much simpler initially. It only requires your placing your hands on a photo screen. The images get shared with every computer record in the nation, and results usually come back within a week. There is a cost associated with the process. That cost can vary from county to county, so you should check on that. In New York City, we have something called GoPass, but if you're not in New York City, unfortunately, it's not available to you. Also, I want to remind you, tell people rather, that there are online services that do background checks, and they do very good, very thorough background checks, but they don't do fingerprint background checks. One that our national organization has vetted and has approved is verifyvolunteers.com, and there you pay by the level of product or the amount of product that you buy. If you just want to check a social security number, if you want to check driver's license, if you want to check their credit rating, if you want to check their work history, there are a number of things that you can ask for. Each item will just be added onto your bill, but you can look them up and you can see how they work. The other one is LexisNexis, which is also a very responsible resource. And you can get them at riskmanagementlexisnexis.com. An added benefit, oh, I'm sorry. Not all programs are geographically designed to accommodate a person's background check. And for this reason, we have things like Verify Volunteers and LexisNexis. Okay, let's talk about training. Screening volunteers did not end once they've been scheduled for training. The training room is an excellent place for program managers to observe a volunteer engaging with the subject of mentoring and interacting with others. Are participants listening attentively? Are the questions they ask appropriate in relation to the topic that's currently being discussed? Are they respectful of other participants as well as the presenter? These are all important indicators of how participants will act once they've been matched to a mentee and should be considered very carefully. Some enhancements that I mentioned earlier that we want to talk about. As people move into this virtual world of mentoring, to be able to be keeping safe distance from their mentees. There are certain things that you really need to think about and consider. One is selecting a video chat platform that is private. Um, we want to make sure that people keep children off of open source platforms. An example of an open source platform is Skype. Skype requires all participants to open an account. So in order to communicate through Skype with another person, they have to also have a Skype account. When people's account information is open and available, um, what we are concerned about a website like this, an open source platform, is this is a very easy way for predators to troll for minors and send messages. However, there are private chat, video chat services that are available. Some of them are free. If you have an iPhone or iPad, FaceTime is free. Um, Zoom has a free version, and you can get a Zoom account. Anyone can get a Zoom account for free right now, and you can chat up to 40 minutes with any single individual at a time. You want to make certain with virtual mentoring that the mentor has privacy wherever they are when they're chatting. So nowadays, we've been having in the last 2 weeks, we've had numerous conversations with programs about how they shift to virtual mentoring. And if they're going to be interviewing a potential mentor, they should be doing it through one of these websites like Zoom or GoToMeeting so that they can actually see the mentor face to face. I don't think a phone call is really sufficient. You can't see someone's facial expressions or their body posture when you ask them more thoughtful questions. But you also want to make sure that where mentors are is private, given the fact that you're going to be asking them very personal questions. You also want to use this as an opportunity if you're doing a virtual interview to review ethical principles about the program. Observe the mentor's dress and their space. Also review issues of confidentiality and disclosure with them. In this day and age where people's health is in question, issues about confidentiality and disclosure are very important. We expect that all programs are looking to the CDC and following CDC guidelines as far as what's accurate information. We know that there's a lot of false information that's going out on the web to people. Someone gave me the example this morning. If you drink a glass of water every 15 minutes, you can flush COVID-19 out of your system, which is a complete fabrication. Has absolutely no basis in science whatsoever. Um, uh, but we're also concerned about uh, volunteers understanding information about themselves, what is confidential, and what they choose to disclose. These are all things that should be discussed with the supervisor. We also want we want volunteers to know that we only tell basic information about you to your mentee and their family. Um, Anything personal about you, that is your business and that's up to you to disclose. Um, we are never going to put a mentee at risk. Um, but anything that has to do with your health or anything is really for the mentor to disclose. In the same token, um, any information we think is pertinent the volunteer needs to know about the mentee or the mentee's family, usually the families have signed a release to share that information with the mentee. But you want to keep conversations with your mentee confidential. You don't want to disclose anything unless there is danger involved in what they've told you. Jack, do you have anything to add to that? We talked about this earlier, I know. Um, do you have anything you want to add to the issue of confidentiality and disclosure, especially given the times we're living in right now?
No, I think you just about, covered it for the most part. I mean, if you have specific questions and stuff, we'll be available afterwards, individually. But I
Okay,
think
great,
you hit it pretty good.
great. Okay, good. All right, let's move on. So there are some additional tools that I think I mentioned before. One of them is the sex offender registry, which I think is very important. It's now been nationalized. And you can go to the National Sex Offender Registry right online. Okay. Basically, what that will tell you is but the more information you give them, a name, an address, a zip code, the better they will be at searching for whether or not someone has been accused of a crime. The thing that's different between a background check and the sex offender registry is in the sex offender registry, um, uh, in most states, in many states, people get on it if they've been accused of a crime against a child or a sexual violence. And in some states, I know in New Jersey, even if you've committed a crime against an animal, you go on that registry. So in many cases, if there's a case pending, they're not going to have a record that's going to show up in their background check, but they will be identified on the offenders registry. Some programs utilize home visits as another way to determine the fitness of a volunteer. How a volunteer lives, it can be a way to determine, even if you're not going to allow home visits, which most programs don't allow in the volunteer's home, it still can sometimes tell us something about the volunteer. So one of the options is if you have the opportunity to do a face-to-face interview, we're talking in the future, of course, going to the volunteer's home and actually doing it there in the volunteer's home. Additionally, there's more information available online, and it's advised that anybody who screens Google a candidate's name and address to see how they're represented on various online profiles. Everybody does this. If you don't think that your employers have done this, anybody who works in HR knows everyone is going online to check potential new employees to see what their online profiles look like and any information about them. And we highly recommend this. It's the easiest thing. It costs nothing. It doesn't take very much time. So why do we do a DMV check? Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't. Well, let's go back, Jack. Let's go back. let's a little detail about how to use a sex offender registry. This is the website. I apologize for that. This is the website. You use the search by name option, enter as complete a name as possible. If you know the middle name or middle initial, that helps. But this is the website, fbi.gov, scams and safety / sex offender registry. Okay, so why do we do a DMV check? This is our last poll. Why do you think what do you think the benefit of doing a DMV check would be in your determining someone's fitness to be a mentor? Is it because someone may have many speeding tickets that might mean that they're often late? Because many speeding tickets show a disregard for rules, or because drivers who make up their own rules are not good role models? Which one do you think it is? Okay, so most of you, 65%, said many speeding tickets shows a disregard for rules. That is 100% right. 59% of you said drivers who make up their own rules are not good role models. That is also correct. And many speeding tickets might mean that they are often late. That is also a consideration. So the truth is all three of those are correct. Many of us have one or two speeding tickets. Sometimes they're unavoidable. We've all had the experience of turning off a highway onto the feeder road before we get onto a side road, and we're still doing 50 before we're able to slow down to 40 and slow down to 30. And at certain times of the day, there are often cops sitting in a car just waiting for you to get off the highway to give you a ticket because there's a sign that says 30 miles per hour on the exit and you're still doing 40. That's one or two tickets are unavoidable. It's understandable. What you should be concerned about is with the person who has multiple tickets. These are often people who don't like to follow the rules. People who make up their own rules are mavericks. Being a maverick in business might be a good thing, but a maverick on the road is a danger to the public safety, and a maverick in your own mentoring program is a supervision nightmare just waiting to happen. This is the first person to decide that rule doesn't apply, that a rule only applies to other mentors, not to me. I can take my mentee back to my apartment, it's okay. I don't care if a PhD psychologist who has volunteered to mentor in your program, if you determine that they are not someone you can effectively supervise, let them go. Some people are not followers. Tell these people they have a lot of good ideas, but maybe they should start their own program. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is right now we're going to ask you guys to take out your phones and take a picture of the Q square. As soon as you do, a survey is going to pop up, and we're going to ask everybody if you would just take like 2 minutes right now, answer the questions on that survey.
You don't need to take a picture of it, just point your camera at it and it should pop up. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, we will send a follow-up email with the link, but this is just easier for some people. So while you take a minute to do this, If you want to type any questions into the question box, let me know. We're just about at time. It's 3 o'clock now, so I don't want to keep you any longer than promised.
Jack, can we actually unmute people if they want to ask questions? Let's try it.
I have a question in the question box that says, do you have templates or sample screening tools?
There are
some.
Go ahead, Jack.
There are some on the website as well for our national office, and I'll make sure that link is included in the follow-up email. But on the national office website, there's our Elements of Effective Practice toolkit that includes a number of templates and things like that that you can base your stuff on. And yes, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint attached to the follow-up email.
So some of those tools include sample volunteer applications, sample blank reference letters, questions to ask when you're speaking with a reference, things like that. So like Jack said, yes, there are a number of tools. If you look under day-to-day operations would be the section in the toolkit that you look under. You'll see a lot of screening tools there.
Someone asked a question about using group, like doing group interviews, and especially around like sample questions and things like that. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
So there's actually two ways. It's a very good question because there are a couple of ways that group interviews are used. Some of you may have either gone up for a job where your initial interview was or a follow-up interview was a group interview, which is done to see how people interact with other people. Or you may have been in a group interview for your college or for your master's program. When I went for my master's, my interview was with 6 other people in a room, and we were all asked the same questions and also asked to comment on other people's questions. It's a style or technique of learning more about somebody. It's not an uncommon thing to do. The problem with a group interview with mentoring is that if that's the only thing that you're going to do, is that is not the place to go do a deep dive into somebody's childhood, because they're not going to disclose information, and you shouldn't really ask them to disclose that kind of information in front of 5 or 6 other people. If you're going to do a combination of a one-on-one along with a group interview, I think that's terrific. And if you have a format for doing that, go ahead and do it. Also, something that I neglected to say, if you can do an interview with a colleague, so you have someone that you can check their feelings against your feelings, so that it's not just you that the program is relying on and your opinion. We all have our prejudices, one way or another, as objective as we try to be. And it's always good to have somebody as a counterbalance. I have done that a number of times, and I think it's a very useful tool. Also, if your mentoring model is group mentoring, it might be a good idea to incorporate a group interview along with a one-on-one for just that purpose. But if you can't do it or you don't do it, I think you might be able to learn the same from observing the volunteer in the training. You might learn the same kind of information about them. Any other questions?
It looks like it's it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your attention today. I hope this information has been helpful in learning more about screening volunteers, and I hope I didn't create any anxiety. I hope what I did was give you more tools and more to think about, so that you are more successful in the process. We are always available. Here's our contact information. Please email us. We are going to be following up with an email that's going to include the PowerPoint along with a couple of links to our website and our national website where you can find more information about this and about other trainings. We hope that you have a very good rest of the week. Please stay safe, stay sheltered, and keep the hope. Okay? Thank you very much.